Alright, so we're going to get started with doing our shading. And what we're going to do is use our cross contour to inform where we're shading at. So if I start by looking at my drawing, I'm going to go ahead and think of my value range. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we've got our darkest value range at 5. Oh, I accidentally drew an extra box. So 5, 4, 3, and a 2. Alright, and this is just going to help inform me of what values I should be seeing in my work. Okay, so I'm going to start by filling in the background, which is going to be that 5. And I'm just going to keep shading in that one direction for my first pass and make sure I come around my shapes, because I don't want to accidentally shade those in. As long as I'm keeping my pencil on its side, I can shade pretty quickly for that first pass. Now I'm going to come in and do it on the other side. And because I've drawn in that horizon line, I know that that's where I want my shape to come up to. I'm not worrying so much if I'm going outside of that rectangle for my shading that I'm drawing within. Alright, now I'm going to turn my pencil just a little bit to keep coming in and doing my shading from the other direction. And I'm going to try and blend it in at the sides here in a minute. Alright, so far I've been able to build up all of this value without blending once. We shouldn't be blending really at all in this drawing. We're just using the side of our wooden pencil to get in here and add value. And as long as we are blending with the side of our pencil, we shouldn't be getting tons of those directional marks anyway. Alright, so at this point I think we're pretty close to that 5 value. So I'm just going to come in and clean up along those edges where I might have come over a little bit. Alright. So now I'm ready to start shading in my ground down here. So I'm going to go ahead and come in and shade in our ground there. So when I say ground, I mean like what the objects are sitting on, not a ground as in we're laying down one color across everything. So here maybe I'm going for like a 2 or 3. You know what, actually, let's go ahead and do this as a ground through our shapes. So we're shading all of that bottom part and all of the top parts of our shapes with that ground. You'll see that they don't quite disappear, but they do get close. Oops, it lost my reference image. There we go. They get pretty close to disappearing once I put in my ground. Some of them stand out a little more than others, so I might have to go back and lighten those up when I'm done with my drawing. So now I've put in a ground, which is one color across all, regardless of value. Okay, so now I can come in with my eraser and erase out some of the highlights that I see. So I know at the top where I have my cylinder, I'm going to come in and erase out everything I put in there. And then it gets a nice hard edge all the way around. All right. So now I've got that back edge figured out because all we've done is erased and put the shade behind. There isn't a hard line that goes behind that. Same thing here. I'm going to come next to this shape and just color in a little bit darker value behind it, and then start bringing over my value in the same direction that my contour lines are in. So it starts out pretty dark, and I'm going to wrap it around, and then gets lighter as we go across. Still wrapping in that same motion. So here we are using some of that directional line to give us what we want. Keep beefing up the background as I need to, as I'm discovering more values. And then over here on my edge is where I have that highlight, so I'm just going to come in and bring that highlight out. And then again, beef up that 5 value next to it. And then I can even come in and erase out some of those directional lines. To help blend out some of that shade. All right, now I get down to the edge where it's meeting, and there's that dark line that goes around because it's that thin shadow, and then the top of my cube stays in shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and shade that in. Gonna make that nice dark line where my background starts. Just keep building up our 5 value. All right, now for the front of my cube, I'm gonna come in and erase that out because there is a highlight all along this edge. So come in and bring out that edge by pushing the dark behind it and increasing my value. As I work my way up. And now I can come in and work with my side values. So I'll notice that this is much darker here as it comes down in this direction. And then it hits our sphere. And it gets really dark again over here by our cone. So I'm gonna add more shadow over there. And it is darker along this edge than it is behind in that negative space. So I'm gonna push all of this to be much darker. And then leave the middle part kind of light compared to these edges down here. Might even go in and erase out a little bit of this. All right, and then over here, it's pretty much all that same flat tone. So I'm gonna keep that in there. And try and make it blend in with those lines. But down here, we do have that nice dark line where that shadow is. All right, now if I come into my sphere, I know that up here is gonna be my highlight. And then I know that right around here is the part where it starts to get really dark. And down at the bottom, there's a little patch where it gets a little bit lighter before getting dark in our shadow again. So I'm gonna start with our shadow and get in that nice dark 5 value I want. And now I know what I want that 5 to match because I've got the dark part in the background set. And now there's that line that's pretty dark, but then it gets kind of light before getting nice and dark again in my sphere. And I'm just gonna keep shading it with those directional lines. All the way up. As it starts to get lighter around here. And then on that point in the middle, right, we're gonna erase out to get the top part of my circle. And you'll see that I don't have a line for the top of the circle. All I have is my erased value next to my shaded value. So we're not outlining anything. We're just putting value next to value to get our lines. Coming back around my bottom to help darken that up a bit. To our middle. And then I come back underneath and find that shadow and darken it up just a smidge so it looks like our circle is sitting on our cube, or sorry, on our ground, And then coming back and finding that darkest part of the shadow again and darkening it up in the shape. All right, there we go. So now we've got our sphere in. Now I can come in on my cone and start to shade that in too. And again, working with those same lines we talked about for our direction. As we work up. Staying darker on the one side as we come up. And working our way around. And then coming back on this edge for our highlight. And then erasing out in those same directional marks. To show us how the light's getting picked up there. Now if we look down here, we've got a little bit of reflected light, so I'm gonna make the bottom shadow down here a little bit lighter. And it does get really dark up on this part. So I'm going to come in and add those directional marks coming down to help us keep that a little bit darker. Give us that nice line for that shadow down here. And then I'm going to come in and fill in that nice dark shadow that this guy sits on. Now if I come over to my cube, I'm going to go ahead and start with this shape for my shadow. Fill him in. And then start to fill in my darker side, which is like a 5 or a 4 maybe. And my side over here is maybe a 3 or a 2, somewhere between. So I'm going to fill that in, same directional lines. And then my top is definitely a 1. So I'm going to come in and erase out for those lines. And I can always touch up by coming in with that shade behind and filling that in where it needs to go. All right, and then my pyramid, same thing. Put that shadow down here underneath it, where it's really nice and dark. And then we've kind of got just that light shade that comes up. And then this side is definitely a highlight that gets pulled out. Now we can go in where we need to and darken up any of that background where we didn't do it yet to make it match. And now we can just keep looking to see where we need to push our darks a little bit more. Where maybe we need to color in some more of our ground. To make sure we've got the right shades we're working with. All right, so now we have a fairly accurate representation of our reference image. We have it both with our cross contour outline up top and then our shaded version on the bottom, where it really pops out and we start to see those shapes in space. So that is our goal, is to not need lines to make our work pop. If we use lines, something more like this, and then when we shade, we're not having to blend, right? That is one of the key factors. We're just using value next to value to start pulling those out. So you're going to want to do that in the same order, and you should have a drawing that looks fairly accurate like this. If you want to take it to the next level, you could sign your name in the bottom corner, nice and small. That's how you know it's a finished work. All right, so when you're all done, this is pretty much what I want to see in your Schoology submission. Make sure you take a photo that's got all of these in here. And I will see you in class. Bye, everyone.